South Africa's Defence Minister Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula said that the world was watching, and this time around there would be no turning back in holding the leaders of South Sudan to account for their actions. Our acting political editor Sophie Mokoena spoke with the Defence Minister earlier.
Firstly, this was a meeting in the main, as you know, to deal with issues of South Sudan. The meeting was attended by members of the P5 and of course amongst those you do have Ethiopia, which is chair of IGAD, and there was a lengthy discussion about what the implications of the ceasefire, for instance, are. Now, one of the things which we discussed at length, which the presidents discussed at length, was what role should the C5 play vis-a-vis IGAD, okay? It's very important that we do not seek to do what has been done already, but rather to complement, our efforts should complement those of IGAD. But the president, who is the chair currently, made a very important observation, which is that we Africans must find a permanent solution to the challenges of South Sudan. Because if we are to run away from this responsibility, other people will take over this responsibility. So obviously there's great concern. It's not the first time that they've signed a ceasefire, remember? It is now a third attempt. And of course, each time this has been done, when parties have committed themselves to peace, they then violate the agreement. What was said this time is it's going to be very important that there be some kind of implications. There has to be some kind of censor, punitive measures for people who continue to violate an agreement which has been reached. What was interesting as the heads of state were going on and on about this was the pain they've had to go through in trying to bring peace to South Sudan. But whenever this has been done, whenever there has been this mention of a permanent ceasefire, and of course there's then a violation, but there's never been consequences for that. I think the feeling of the House from everybody was that it's about time there be punitive measures put in place. The leaders of the two parties, in the event of a violation of this particular ceasefire, should take responsibility, or they should be made to take responsibility. My view is that it should start with exerting pressure on them, so that they fully understand the implications of whatever may happen. Of course, there's rumor already that there may have been a violation of the ceasefire, but obviously they would have to go and engage on those matters. There would have to be verification of that information so that the heads of state can then take action.
Well, Minister, indeed there are reports that there's a violation of ceasefire right now. You're talking about action and consequences. But do you think sanctions? Some people are saying, let the two leaders face sanctions.
Of course. Well, not economic sanctions, because once you talk economic sanctions, you are immediately saying to the people of South Sudan, in addition to the challenges they are having, that there should be more problems in that country. There are enough economic challenges in South Sudan currently. But what you need, the heads of state need to identify the kind of censure that will have an impact on the two leaders concerned. Because at the end of the day, the two are fighting, but the people who suffered most are the people, the ordinary South Sudanese.
South Africa has invested so much in terms of assisting this new nation to become a real powerful force on the continent and take their rightful place. I mean, for quite a long time we've been involved in the mediation between South Sudan and Sudan. Do you think it's still worth it that we continue to pursue this? Because it looks like they are not listening.
Well, we have to, accept that with a bit of impatience. I think our leaders have been very, very patient with the leaders of South Sudan, both President Salva Kiir and Riek Machar. There's been a lot of patience. Our president, as you know, has been working in that area and is actually the chair of this forum we've just come out of. And one of the things which was said by other heads of state was they expressed an admiration of his patience in trying to find a solution in the problems of South Sudan. My view is that we just need exercise a bit of impatience now, so that they understand that each time there's violation of the ceasefire, it has negative implications on the ordinary people of South Sudan. And people of South Sudan they are poor, and yet South Sudan has enormous resources, God-given resources, mineral resources, which were given to them by God. And we think that South Sudan, it's about time that South Sudan finds its way into resolving the socio-economic challenges of the people. But we know that that cannot happen before you've ensured that there is peace and stability in South Sudan.
IGAD is not prepared to host Riek Machar currently. Are we going to continue to host him in South Africa?
Well, depending on what the people want. Remember, it was not our decision to host him from the beginning. There was a request which was made to South Africa to host Riek Machar. What is important is that South Africa has done its best. South Africa has supported the peace initiatives throughout, and South Africa has, on the eve of the signing of this agreement, where we simply got to know a few hours before that he should be dispatched to the venue where the ceasefire to Sudan. So I'm just saying we never seek to impose ourselves as a country. But when we are required to do something, we always have to exercise our minds as to what the implications of that would be. But he too, Riek Machar and President Salva Kiir, need to understand that this thing has to come to an end, and that the whole continent is losing patience. If this time they cannot keep to the letter and the spirit of the ceasefire agreement, then it's going to create a problem for all of us.
And finally, Minister, in terms of deployment of troops, if there was to be a request to assist in terms of deployment of troops, are we going to be able to perhaps assist if there's a request to deploy troops or strengthen the force there?
Look, firstly, we have a bilateral agreement with South Sudan. We have what is called the Defense Committee, which meets on an annual basis. But equally, we are part of the African Union. We are part of this august multilateral institution. And therefore, whatever it is that we will have to do to help in, it would be at the bequest of the African Union. We do not seek to move into South Sudan and South Africa on a bilateral basis. If there is a need, for instance, for DDR processes to be embarked upon and for South Africa to be called in to be part of those, we will avail ourselves. But of course, we'll have to weigh everything, and it would have to be a decision of the African Union, as I've said, and not a decision or a request by the people of South Sudan on the basis of the bilateral agreements that we have. Our bilateral agreements have to do in the main with humanitarian support, which we would want to render to the people of South Sudan.
In terms of capacity building, are we still continuing?
We would love to do that. Remember, the people of South Sudan, and particularly those who come from this, in fact, the entire group which is today fighting, most of them received their academic training in South Africa. They were at the University of Fort Hare, and of course this was through the support which was being given to them by the African National Congress. But of course, as the African National Congress, having been a liberation movement ourselves, having gone through some of what the people of South Sudan have gone through, we've been giving this solidarity because we feel we have an obligation to do so. But it does not mean that it is endless. There must come a time where we all say as a continent, and I think this is what the heads of state were saying today, that there has to be punitive measures in the event now these two leaders violate the agreement, because the two leaders must be in control. They must seize, take charge and be in control of that situation. So no one can say, no, my grouping, I did issue an instruction and they would not listen. If you
akungiphathi kahle